Hi, everybody. How are y'all? Yeah? Like it's 40 degrees out. It's basically 90. Is that kind of how we're all feeling? I walked out this morning and I was like, oh, this is going to be a lovely day. It was 30. And I was like, I don't need my coat. Oh, I was like, you need your coat. Get your coat. So, anyway. All right. Well, I'm hoping that everybody has in some way managed to survive the time that we've been out and everything else without any kind of huge amount of disturbances. I know we're behind. We were behind before we were behind, and then we got class canceled for a week. So I know that we're behind. So we'll talk about that to start with. I'll try to assuage some fears or maybe some concern about when our assignment's going to be due, when are we doing the lab, like how is all of that going to work, okay? And so we'll do that first, then we'll start talking about some kind of the hows and the whys of assessing muscular fitness, okay? And so what I'm probably going to do, if you guys look at everything, is we have two things that we were supposed to have done while we were gone, okay? So we'll talk about those two things, and then we'll talk about the test, all right? Because I know we're approaching when we would actually have a test, and I'll give you guys an option on kind of what we may do about that, okay? So the first thing that I want you guys to be aware of is don't freak out. Our number one rule in class is don't freak out. Weather is crazy. We're fine. I'll get us caught back up, right? We'll sort all of these things. We'll sort all of this out and try to make it as normal as possible. So the first thing that we missed was the resistance training protocol critique, all right? So I need to do today's lecture, or most of today's lecture, for you guys to have any clue about what I want you to do on that, all right? So ideally, I will assign the resistance training critique today. It will be due next Monday, okay? And I'll put this in an announcement on Canvas. I prefer to do the announcement things rather than trying to change the syllabus or anything, but I'll just put it in the announcement. Resistance training critique will be assigned today. You'll have a week to do it. It will be due next Monday, okay? In essence, what you are going to do is go online and find a weight training program, okay? You're going to print that off, and then you're going to do a little critique of it. You're going to say, they're doing this, and this is good. They're doing this is bad. Here's how I would change what they're doing in order to make it better, okay? So that's the purpose of the critique. This is a way for you guys to start actually applying things we're going to talk about in class into some sort of real world sort of setting, okay? There's a lot of bad information out there. There's also plenty of good information. There's a lot of bad programs or programs that are kind of somewhere in the middle, okay? So that's what you're going to do. And I'll mention a little bit more on Wednesday, but ideally what I want everyone to do is don't everyone click on the first thing that comes up in Google. Don't go to Google and type in resistance training program and everyone pick out the very first thing that comes in, okay? So go down a couple, go to the second page on Google, right? And try to find something that's a little bit unique. So as I will put in the announcement, if the ideal thing is look today, okay? Find something you think will work, email me the link and let me look at it, and I can give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I can say, yep, that looks fine, okay? Because there's going to be some things that it's going to be helpful if the program includes or doesn't include, okay? You're going to want a program that is very much just weightlifting, okay? And really and truly weightlifting, not body weight stuff, okay? Not, I'm trying to do Pilates for spring break or whatever that is. Not that, like real legitimate muscular fitness training. Okay, so that will be due next Monday. You guys will, there will be a Dropbox, okay, on Canvas. You will turn it in there. Additionally, okay, as a part of all of that, there is going to be, there's an assignment kind of thing that has a grading rubric. It's going to tell you guys what I'm looking for, how I'm going to look at it, et cetera, et cetera. That's on Canvas. So try to follow that when you're talking about things. The single most common way that people lose points is you just don't provide the information that I'm asking for. Okay? You don't talk about, is it following the FIT principle, which we will talk about today. You don't talk about, does it have progression and repetition and overload, okay? Why or why not? Or you don't make any recommendations on, this was good, I would change this. Or they totally didn't include this, okay? That's the single biggest way that people miss points on this, is they just don't follow the direction, all right? That's one. The second thing is going to be a lab. So what we're going to do for lab is I'm going to have you guys in class on Wednesday, okay? In class on Wednesday. And for those of you that normally come via Zoom, we're going to try to schedule something outside of that. In class on Wednesday, we're going to assess everybody's grip strength, okay? It's a very simple thing. You guys can show up, you squeeze a thing, I'll wipe it off with the Clorox wipe while everybody else is sitting down. You can write down your number, voila, we're good to go. The rest of the stuff from the first lab, the sit-ups and push-up portion of the test, of the lab, you guys will do at home or outside, I don't care. You can do it outside of class, okay? So we're gonna assess a couple of strength things. We're not gonna do the bench press portion of the lab, which makes me very, very sad. It's my absolute favorite thing. We're gonna do that on Wednesday. And then you'll have a week from Wednesday to turn that in, okay? So next Monday, the critique will be due. Next Wednesday, your lab will be due. We're gonna get this stuff, I'm gonna want by Friday at noon, we'll talk about this on Wednesday, I'm gonna want your push-up values and your sit-up values and your grip strength values. Because what we do is, I take data from the entire class, and then you guys will make graphs based upon your data in comparison to the rest of class, okay? And I will give you guys some bench press data, some historical, I have data from many, many classes past. I'll give you guys some bench press data so that you can look and compare. And what we do is we compare men to women, you compare yourself to normative values, yourself to the rest of the class, and it lets you contextualize what's going on, okay? Yes, and I apologize again, I've totally forgotten everybody's name because we're never here, and I know you guys in the context of where you're sitting. So when you raise your hand today, I'm just going to ask you to remind me of your name. So,
I'm Maddie.
Maddie, okay. Okay, great question. So, for the lab, ladies, all of you, we're not going to call them lady push-ups, okay? We're there. It's called a modified push-up where your knees are on the ground, okay? Plenty of men do modified push-ups. Plenty of senior people, there's a lot of reasons to do that, okay? There's no sort of judging on those things, but yes, the norms for women are laid out using the modified push-up, okay? The norms for men are laid out using the kind of what we would think of as a regular or kind of the full-on push-up, okay? So that's what you guys will do, all right? And so, good question. Women will do the modified push-up, where you do push-ups with your knees on the ground, okay? Men will do the regular push-up where toes are on the ground, knees are not on the ground, okay? So I have had women in the past that wanted to do regular push-ups. One year we had an all-American gymnast in class, and she did more push-ups than everybody else in the class doing the full-on regular ones, okay? She did more sit-ups than anybody I've ever seen in my life, to be honest. So We're like, yes, we get it. You're in the 99th percentile of like all people in your ability to do push-ups. It was fine. Okay. So that's how it's going to be. I'll give a little bit more information on that when we assign it after today. That will make a little bit more sense. Okay. Good question. Okay. Now for the test, and I'm going to try to look at, folks that are on Zoom, this is where y'all are going to get your chance to also participate. Okay. Let's see everybody. So here's our options for the test. We can keep the test roughly where it was supposed to be. Okay. Does anybody have your syllabus you can pull up? I feel like it was supposed to the 3rd. So that's next week, next Wednesday. We can keep the test on next Wednesday. Okay. And I will just test you on whatever it is that we manage to get through Monday of next week. Okay. That's an option. We can push the test back until we've covered all of the material that I would normally have on the first test, which will be what we're going to do today and a little bit on Wednesday, plus all of the kind of cardiorespiratory stuff. Okay? Which probably pushes the test back at least a week. Okay? Those are kind of what our options are. If you guys have a strong preference one way or the other, it makes me no difference one way or the other. I'm going to test you guys on all of the material at some point, and so I don't really care. Okay, you know, it's more work for me to have to pull stuff off of the test and write some additional questions to cover more of the stuff that we've already. You know, if it's shorter, I'll write a few extra questions on the other stuff, but I can do that. That's not a problem. So, thoughts? Cool, okay. I'm sorry? Okay, we have one for pushing it back. Okay, does anybody feel strongly about having it next week and not pushing it back? Okay. Anybody feel strongly about, that pushing it back is going to be, that pushing it back is going to be the best thing? Yes, that's correct. My preference would be to push it back, but I want to give you guys the option. We don't have to do that, okay? Zoomers, anybody feel strongly one way or the other? Cool, okay. Oh, there was somebody in the chat. Nobody wants to talk, but they want to put it in the chat. Okay, that's fine. Well, we got 5 people in the chat. Push it back, does not matter, no preference. Okay. All right, well, seeing and hearing no dissent from pushing it back, which if you want to dissent, and that's going to be a big problem, you can come talk to me after class. Like, it's fine. You don't have to speak up in front of the peer pressure of everyone else in class. Then we'll just push it back, okay? And so probably by Monday of next week, I will have a much better sense of when exactly it's going to be. But let's plan on probably pushing it back at least a week. So from the 3rd until the 10th, yay, math, right? Yeah, from the 3rd until the 10th, okay?
Are there exams on campus or are they in person?
Exams are in person. And we can, if need be, for my folks that need a little bit more time and those kinds of things, we can either schedule on the same day, schedule for folks to like come over to our building and take it. It's easy to isolate. I know sometimes the DRC gets full and those things, so we can do that. But the plan is that it will be in person. It will not be on campus. I know some people have them in person, but they're still on campus, which just baffles me, but okay. As much stuff as we can do manually, old schoolized, that's what I would much prefer to do. Okay? All right. Let's talk about muscular fitness, okay? Let's talk about muscular fitness. I assume you guys have seen this before, and we're gonna start off with this and talk about contraction types. I know we've done a little bit, but we'll find a way to make this work. So the next two big things we're gonna cover in class are gonna revolve very much around how do we tell how strong your muscles are, okay? What are the different ways that we can test that? And then once we know that information, how can we make use of it in order to try to prescribe some kind of resistance training, some kind of weightlifting or body weight training, something like that to you to see if we can make you stronger, okay? And I hope that at least initially, I will try to demonstrate to you why being stronger is in fact actually a better thing, okay? So we're going to talk about prescribing weights and we're going to talk about assessing things. We need to understand a couple of things on the front, okay? One of those is going to be what we call functional classifications of muscles. So muscles can be classified in a bunch of different ways. We're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to talk very simply about agonist, antagonist, and then what we call synergist or assistive muscles, okay? So when you perform some sort of movement, okay, any kind of movement, the muscle or muscles that are primarily responsible for the force that is used to perform that movement, those are called the agonist muscles, okay? So if I can find something here, this will be great. This will make me look super strong. I'm going to take my paper towels, okay, which are surprisingly heavy, okay? Take my paper towels and I perform a bicep curl, right? Arm down, curl up, okay? My bicep, or my biceps muscles, right, that are going to be there. Those are the agonist muscles. They're the primary muscles that are helping me to move, okay? So that's what's happening here, all right? An antagonist muscle is the muscle that is going to oppose the agonist. It's the muscle most generally that is on the other side of the joint, okay? So if you have a relatively simple movement like, right, like arm flexion, then I have biceps and biceps brachii that are doing the agonist work to flex, okay? And then I have triceps that are the antagonists that are providing a little bit of stabilization across that joint. And those are going to be the antagonists, okay? We need to understand how these two things work. Because if your antagonist doesn't work correctly, then sometimes that's going to be bad, right? Some of our responses to training are going to be changes in antagonist, agonist kind of patterns. Then synergist muscles are muscles that are going to be assisting. They're going to help the agonist muscle perform its action. They may function from providing a little bit of direct force to help us move. They may also function by providing some stabilization across different joints in that particular way. Okay? So when I'm doing a bicep curl, right, you could say that I've got some, like my rear delt and things that are here in the shoulder, right? Maybe even some of my rotator cuff muscles, they're going to contract. And what they're doing is they're holding and stabilizing the shoulder as I'm moving the lower portion of my arm. Okay? Those are our functional classifications. When we assess strength, okay, for the most part, what we are trying to assess is the strength of the agonist muscles. Okay? Strength of the agonist muscles. One of our problems with this, though, okay, is that if you have an overactive antagonist muscle, that's going to make your agonist muscle look weaker. If you have weakness in antagonist or weakness in synergist muscles, you can't stabilize a joint correctly, and therefore you cannot actually lift as much weight with your agonist as you might otherwise be able to. Okay? And so we'll talk about some scenarios where that might come up. I probably should have pulled some video. One of our former master students now competes in like strongman competitions. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's video of him this weekend like flipping over tires and like taking a 50-pound thing and like throwing it over his head over bars like a pole vaulting kind of thing. But there are going to be scenarios where my synergist muscles are the limiting factor in how much weight I can functionally lift. Okay? I may be strong enough to do a deadlift where I bend over, grab a bar, and pick up a certain amount of weight. My agonist, right, my quads, my hip flexors, my glutes may be strong enough to do that. But if my hands, the muscles in my feet that control my fingers, my wrist, they're going to let me hold on to the bar. If they're not strong enough to hold that much weight in the bar, it doesn't matter if my legs can actually functionally lift that weight. Okay? I may be limited by my synergist muscles or something. Does that make sense, guys? You guys understand where I'm coming from with all of that? Okay. It's a consideration of testing that becomes really important with people doing rehab. It becomes really important with people that are older and may have kind of limiting factors in certain places. Okay. That's why I think having some level of appreciation about this is going to be helpful and useful. Oh, there we go. Okay. I know we talked about this when we were doing our strength testing day, when we talked about velocity. There's also contraction types, okay? When we assess strength, we also need to be very, very specific about the type of muscle contraction that we're going to perform, right? When most people think about how much weight can you lift in a particular lift, they are thinking of a concentric contraction, right? Concentric. How much weight can I curl up with my bicep, right? Concentric contraction, the agonist muscle is shortening, okay? That's what most people think of as when we determine strength. Okay? You could, though, if you wanted to, test maximal strength during eccentric contractions where the agonist muscle is lengthening, okay? So give me the weight up here at my shoulder and how much weight can I lower down in comparison to picking up, okay? Remember from the force-velocity relationship that eccentric contractions can generate more force than concentric. You can always lower down more weight than you can ever hope to pick up. Okay? Or we could also do some testing with what's called an isometric contraction. And so with the bicep, an isometric contraction is just how much can I hold here and be very, very still. When we assess your grip strength in class on Wednesday, that's also going to be an isometric contraction. There are some devices that we can use that allow us, you squeeze on the device or push or pull against the device as hard as you can, and the device is so strong that it doesn't allow any movement. And so that would be an isometric contraction. So in a theoretical kind of perfect physiological world, eccentric contractions, you're the strongest. Isometric contractions with that same muscle group are the second strongest, and then concentric contractions are going to be the weakest. Okay? They're going to be the weakest. So we'll talk about a little bit more about that as we move on. Okay. When assessing muscular fitness, which is the point of most of today's lecture, okay? we are going to focus on two key components. Maximal strength, okay? So what's the most force that muscle can generate, as well as something that's called muscular endurance, sometimes called local muscular endurance. This is not, okay, muscular endurance as it relates to how fast can you run a mile, how far can you run, right? When you go to spin class, how many individual sprints can you do, or something like that, okay? In this context, muscular endurance is going to represent, okay, lifting a weight as many times as possible. Some sub-maximal amount of weight, okay? Usually an amount of weight that's probably less than 50% of your max. How many times can you do it, okay? So I could take my roll of paper towels, which weighs a couple of pounds probably, okay? And I could do curls with my paper towels. And if I just did this until at some theoretical point I could not do it anymore, that would be an assessment of my muscular endurance, okay? For most of you, when we do push-ups, when we do sit-ups or crunches, okay, those are tests of muscular endurance, right? Most of you are strong enough that you can do that enough times. It's going to be considered a test of muscular endurance, right? And so as we get into the end today and a little bit on Wednesday, talking about prescribing exercise to get stronger, you guys will see why maybe simply doing push-ups, if you're already good at doing push-ups, is not the best way to get a lot stronger, okay? It gets you better at doing a lot of push-ups, which may be good, but it's not that way. So I try to present you guys with some why of why it's important to test muscular fitness. This is going to range, right? Many of you want to be doctors or physical therapists or occupational therapists or something like that. Others of you want to be strength and conditioning coaches or do personal training or just want to do something in your own life. The idea of testing for fitness is we can establish whether or not there are weaknesses in certain muscles, right arm versus left arm, right leg versus left leg, okay? Upper body versus lower body, something like that. Is there a place where there is a weakness or an imbalance, okay? If we know what your maximal strength is or what your maximal endurance is, we can use that information to better design training programs, okay? The single, and I cannot emphasize this enough, having seen this a bunch, when you guys do your critiques, the one thing that most programs you find online or in magazines don't do is they don't do any sort of an assessment of fitness, and therefore they don't have any idea of strength or endurance to use as a jumping off point for what they're going to ask you to do. They're going to say, find a weight that seems like it's kind of heavy and lift that about 8 times. What the hell does that mean, right? What's kind of heavy? What I think is kind of heavy may be very different than what you guys think is kind of heavy, okay? And so to do resistance training, to do endurance, and to do any kind of exercise training, we need to know. We need to know where you are. And we need a way to then come back and check after you've trained for a while to track our progress, okay? If you're going to physical therapy and they're having you do things, right, and it's not actually making you that weak arm any stronger, right? You had shoulder surgery and it's not coming back. Range of motion isn't going up. All of these things, then you're wasting your time and your money. It's not very effective. So we need to be able to track progress, and that's why it's important to assess these things. Okay. We talked about these two kinds of things, right? Maximal strength typically is going to be determined by both the size of your muscles and the ability of your nervous system to turn on that muscle, okay? If I ask all of you to guess, right, in class, who can squat the most weight? Okay. I ask you to look around in class. We're not going to do this, but you can look around. My guess is that most people have a general understanding that people with bigger muscles tend to be a little bit stronger. That's not an absolute, but in a very general sense, that's absolutely going to be the case. Okay? So local muscular endurance is going to be determined and controlled by a whole bunch of different things. Okay? But as it relates to muscular endurance, this idea of something called fatigue physiologically is defined as a failure to produce the desired or expected force. Okay? You give me some weight, initially I can lift it, but after I've done 8 reps or 10 reps or 20 reps or 50 reps or whatever it is, at some point I can no longer pick it up. I have now fatigue. I'm trying to produce the desired amount of force and I can no longer do it. Okay? The idea of fatigue is one of the most important ways to disrupt homeostasis in your muscles and drive adaptations to make muscles stronger and to improve your muscular endurance. Okay? I'll get back to that.
What's the, like, based on that definition, what's the difference between fatigue and disruption?
Great question. So the question is, how is fatigue different from something we're going to call weakness? Okay? Physiologically, that's defined as weakness. In order to fatigue, I have to initially be able to lift that much weight or perform that action, right? I can do it once, I can do it twice, now I can't do it a third time, I've fatigued, okay? Weakness, which should not in this instance carry any sort of kind of negative connotations, like it's just the idea that you cannot generate enough force initially to ever perform that particular movement or lift or whatever it is, right? So like, I am too weak to pick up my car, okay? Does that make sense, guys? That's going to be the difference, okay? And so that's how we're going to kind of split our hairs and all of that. It's a good question. Okay? Other questions? Are we doing okay so far? Do we need to stand up and try to fatigue ourselves in order to do that? You make the folks that are on Zoom turn their Zoom cameras on and like make them do some squats until you guys feel tired for them, and then we'll move on. All right. So there are some health benefits to having more muscular fitness. There's health benefits to being stronger. There's health benefits to having more muscle. There's health benefits to having better muscular endurance. Okay? The preservation or enhancement of what we call fat-free mass, which is just a way of describing muscle mass. So the preservation or enhancement of muscle mass is going to be good for us from a health standpoint. It's going to raise our metabolic rate, which means we get to eat more food, okay? But it's really, really important because if I have strength and I have muscle, that's going to help prevent type 2 diabetes. And it's going to preserve function. I can walk better. I can get up and down stairs. I can get in and out of the bathtub or on and off of the toilet. Okay? Things that most of you don't think about right now, but I assure you, when you get older, will become important. Okay? Am I strong enough to trudge up a somewhat smallish hill with my 35-pound daughter while we're all decked out in our snow pants and your snow boots so that we can sled, right? Because God forbid she walk herself back up the hill, okay? We had big time, but she's not great at walking up all by herself. Things like that, that's going to be good, okay? Having better muscular fitness because of the things that we do to get it are going to help to preserve and enhance bone mineral density, and this is especially important for preventing osteoporosis in women. And as I said, having increased fat-free mass, having more muscle, is going to improve what we call glucose tolerance and insulin sensitivity, which we will talk a lot about later on. but the big issue is that it helps us prevent type 2 diabetes. Right? So having muscle is really important. Having some minimal level of strength is really, really important. Okay? So we do also know that if you have better fitness, it tends to reduce resting heart rate and blood pressure, okay, which are going to be good. If heart rate is lower and blood pressure are lower when you're just in general, that's going to help prevent hypertension. It also is going to be lower when you're doing any kind of activity. And if you have lower blood pressure during an activity, there's less of a chance you're going to have a stroke, okay, or a heart attack. Things you guys don't really have to worry about very much, but are really important in older individuals, okay? Better muscular fitness leads to a reduction in the risk of injury of your musculoskeletal system, especially for low back pain, okay? Especially for low back pain, which is the first or second leading cause of adult disability, okay, in the country. It's the leading cause of people taking opioid medications is low back pain. Okay? Improves your ability to carry out activities of daily living. You have better balance, therefore you're not going to fall over. And in lots of people, having better muscular fitness improves self-esteem. Okay? You will also see, especially as people age, that people tend to have decreased self-esteem and decreases in self-efficacy. This is not solely related to, hey, look at me, I have muscles, let's go to the beach. This is, I can walk where I want to walk. I can do the things in my life that I want to do, therefore I feel better about myself. I can do the things that I need to do so I can live by myself, right? Or I can help take care of my spouse or partner or my friends, and therefore I'm not isolated and alone. I don't have to go to assisted living, et cetera, okay? So it leads to improvements in self-esteem, okay? Okay, now comes the scary part, okay? Now comes the scary part. I can test how strong every one of you in class is, either in how strong your legs are, or I can have you do the grip strength test, and I can predict when you're going to die. Okay? I can predict when you're going to die. Strength predicts survivability. Okay? And so from that, you can draw the inference that it's really important. What you guys see here is in the left graph, this is men. On the right, this is women, okay? And so what we have here, this is quadriceps strength. And they took the men and the women and they grouped them into what we call quartiles. So it's groups of 4. So it's the people that were in the top 25% in strength, right? One of the middle 25% in strength, or the bottom 25% in strength, okay? And they followed these individuals, they tested all of them, and then they followed them out for 6 years. And what you can note from all of this, now again, okay, appreciate, these are older adults. These are people over the age, I think, of 75, okay? So it's not like we tested a bunch of college-age folks. And in the weakest group, 35% of them died within 5 years. These are older adults, okay? But they all start off here, and so what you can see then is that in my weakest group, this shows the percentage of them that survive, excuse me, out to 6 years, okay? So in the weakest group in the men, about almost 35% of them die. In the strongest group, only about 8% die, okay? And so you will note then that, right, the strongest group was on top. I've got our middle couple of groups here, okay? And so there's this dose response. The stronger I am initially, the less chance I have of dying over that 6-year period. Very, very similar kind of thing in women. Note the scales aren't the same, okay? Guys, we die at a higher rate with age than women. Women live longer, okay? For a host of different reasons, okay? But It's the same general type of relationship. The weakest women had the highest mortality rate over that 6.5 or 5.5 or 6 year kind of follow-up out there. Okay? This is quad strength. I'm not going to tell you guys that this means that they're dying because they're weak. Okay? People that are weaker are less active. People that are, because they're less active, they're also going to continue to be weaker. If they're less active, they're going to have more chance of cardiovascular disease. They're less active, there's more chance to be obese or have type 2 diabetes or certain kinds of cancer. There's a bunch of interrelated things. Okay? But the data are very strong and very straightforward. People who are stronger for the longer period of time in their life tend to have fewer health problems. Okay? Just general, kind of keep it that way. Right? It gets, and part of this is absolute strength. If we take and we normalize strength to body size, right? Bigger people are going to be stronger. If we normalize it to body size, that's probably a better way to go. The relationship looks mostly the same. Okay? So I'm not saying, right, to ladies, those of you that are very petite, and you're like, yes, I can't squat, you can squat your body weight, or maybe you can squat a little bit over your body weight or whatever. I'm not saying you have to be able to, squat 500 pounds all of a sudden. But if you can squat twice your body weight or something, that would be really, really good. Most people can do that and try to maintain that. Okay? Something along those lines. That's kind of where we're trying to get to. Okay? All right. Now, there are similar graphs I could show you guys. I'll get the grip strength thing out in a few minutes. There are graphs that look basically identical for doing grip strength. Okay? Now, grip strength is reasonably predictive of whole body strength. You're not dying because you have weak forearm flexors. Okay? You're not. You all will test your grip strength. You'll look at your normative values from labs, and you'll freak out. Okay? Because the norms are from like 50 years ago. And people carried more things and did more manual labor and worked outside a bunch more. They didn't play on their keyboards and their phones all the time. And so just kind of as a group, we're a little weaker in our grip strength than before. But it's the same general idea. Okay? The stronger you are, the longer you're going to live. Okay. So we've talked about most of these kinds of things. We've talked about that. All right. So a couple of things to consider when we want to assess how strong somebody is. Okay? Appreciate there's no one test. Okay? There's no one test of whole body strength. There's no one best test that we can encompass everything that's happening. All right? Now, I can move the divider over here, and we have a machine where you can assess your leg press strength, okay? It tests quads, glutes. It's like a seated squat, basically, okay? That's probably the closest thing that we can get to kind of a general whole body assessment. It doesn't measure upper body, but in general, lower body strength is more important for daily living than upper body strength, as long as you don't perform a job or something that requires lots of upper body strength. Okay? So we have to consider when we do something now, okay, that when you perform a test, your values are very specific to the type of contraction. Is it concentric? Is it eccentric? Is it isometric? Okay? At what velocity was that test performed? Okay? You guys remember that as velocity increases, with concentric contractions, force decreases. So if I give you a weight and I say you need to lift it very quickly, the amount of weight that you can lift at that speed is going to be lower than if I said you can go a little bit slower. So that's going to also be important. It's very specific to the type of equipment that we use. Your values are going to be different for free weights versus machines versus resistance bands versus body weight, et cetera, okay? The amount of weight you can bench press with free weights is going to be different than the amount of weight you can bench press on, say, a bench press machine, okay? In general, you can do more with machines than you can with free weights because the machines are going to better isolate the muscles and they're going to take out sort of the need for some synergist muscles and kind of controlling of the barbells or the dumbbells. Okay? And then range of motion. Okay, range of motion. Some of you have probably seen something that looks like this. I luckily wore my stretchy jeans today. Okay? If I was to do a squat, okay, and I was going to go here, okay, versus there. So I'm doing like 45 degrees of knee flexion versus about 90 degrees of knee flexion. Stretch a little bit, okay? In which one could I probably lift more weight? The 45, okay? So same muscles, same muscle size, okay? Same ability of my brain to turn on those muscles. But the amount of weight I can lift is going to be dependent upon what my full range of motion in that lift is going to be, okay? So remember, when we're assessing muscular fitness, if you ask someone to do a particular lift, their strength value applies only to that lift with that piece of equipment through whatever range of motion you ask them to do, okay? There's no judgment on my part on is one better or worse. I just want you to know that strength will appear different if you ask people to do different ranges of motion. Okay? So, there we have it. Okay. Things to think about before you test somebody, right? What is your posture? What's going to be your contraction speed or velocity? What is your range of motion you're going to ask a person to go with? Ideally, if you're going to test things, we need to familiarize, okay? Show of hands. How many of you have done an actual free weight barbell squat at some point in your life? Okay. Maybe about 3/4 of you in class. Okay. For those of you that haven't, okay, if we ask you to do that today, you would not be as strong today doing as if we let you practice it today and then try again tomorrow or try again on Wednesday. Okay? So to get a really true value of how strong somebody is, if we really, really care, we need to let them practice. We need to familiarize them with the test. Okay? Free weights, complex multi-joint movements like a squat that require certain postures, that require moving at more than one joint, okay? Those are things that require more familiarization than, say, a bicep curl, okay? Or I'm going to have you do a bicep curl without, not with a dumbbell, but a bicep curl on a machine, okay? Or something like that. Does that make sense, guys? Are y'all with me and kind of understanding what that means? Okay. So one of my favorite things about when we do lab normally where we do the bench press is usually about half the class has never done a free weight bench press before. And so it really begins to introduce people to this idea of kind of how awkward and why we need to have familiarization. Okay. Some people say you should warm up. I say hooey fooey, who cares? It's mostly dumb. There's no scientific evidence that really supports a warm-up being good for anything other than maybe making people feel kind of placebo effect more ready to do things. There's no real evidence that it prevents injury. There's no real evidence that it actually makes you any stronger or anything else. So, but every book you read, everything that you do, they will talk about let people do some warm-up, do a little bit of aerobic exercise, do some stretching, blah, 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 okay? Nope. No research. There's no research that supports that stretching does anything but make you more flexible either. Stretching is of no benefit for preventing injuries. Stretching is of no benefit for anything, right? It makes you more flexible. That may be desirable to you for whatever it is that you want to do. You're a gymnast, being more flexible actually is part of, right, like whatever it is that you're doing. But stretch before you're going to do a squat, whatever, doesn't matter. Stretching before you're going to go sprint does not prevent hamstring injuries. No, not at all. Those kinds of things are catastrophic one-time events, no help. Okay? Now, for certain, most kind of sports and things, probably having a greater range of motion at every joint is going to allow you to kind of do more things that may be better. So it's not my thing to say that you shouldn't stretch. It's just that for what a lot of people advertise stretching to do, it's not supported by any science whatsoever. Okay? In the same way that my muscles are sore, what can I do to make my muscles not very sore? And the answer is nothing. Wait. Okay? All the things are going, oh, this helps with recovery. Most of them don't. Nothing helps. If your muscles are sore, come over and let me punch you in those muscles and make them hurt more so that you turn the amplifier down in your central nervous system. You'll feel better for about an hour, and then it goes back. So, right? Stretching doesn't help. Massage doesn't help. Vibration doesn't help. Advil doesn't really help in most people. Okay? Nothing helps. You've damaged your muscles. You just got to wait it out. Kind of like having the flu. Okay? Good questions. And there's our bro science for the day. Okay? All right. We're going to talk about dynamic strength testing, and then we'll take a little break. Okay? So when I speak of dynamic strength testing, what I mean, a dynamic contraction means generally a contraction that involves a concentric and an eccentric movement. Okay? So a dynamic assessment of a squat is underact the weight, squat down, squat back up. Okay? Dynamic. So this is eccentric first, concentric second. I'm doing a bench press, eccentric down, concentric back up. Okay? That's dynamic. Dynamic means movement. Right? This is the most common type of strength testing that we're going to do. All right? The advantage of doing a dynamic strength test is that it tends to correlate better with sport performance because sport performance involves dynamic contractions. Running is a dynamic contraction. Okay? Throwing a baseball is a dynamic contraction. Swinging a golf club, whatever it is that you're doing, generally are dynamic contractions. These tend to be relatively inexpensive. You may need some weight equipment, which can be found in a lot of places that is less expensive than some of the more specialized stuff, like this wonderful robot machine we have back here in the back of the class, which I'll show you guys in a minute. It tends to be pretty accessible, and weirdly enough, there's a bit of a kind of psychological placebo effect where people tend to do better when they can see weights moving. I can see the fact that I'm pushing that barbell. That's better for me than the barbell is tied down and I got to push against it to see what my isometric strength is. People don't like that as much. There's something about physically seeing work being done, seeing movement occur. Okay? Disadvantages of this. Okay? You're really only with dynamic testing measuring how strong you are at the weakest point in a range of motion. So when I squat, I'm only as strong as the weakest place in this full range of motion. So I'm only as strong as basically what I can do all the way down here, okay, as opposed to there. So that's the key thing. When I do a bicep curl, I'm really only as strong as I am in that very bottom portion of the range of motion. Because if you get past about 30 degrees of up flexion, most people then can do the rest of it. That's the weakest point in that range of motion. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Not a criticism, but that's what it is. Also, dynamic testing, because it tends to most of the time involve the most amount of weight you can lift once, it tends to go very slowly. Okay? So we're not measuring strength at different velocities, much less at very fast velocities, which for most people doesn't matter, but for some athletes and things, it may become very, very important. Okay? So the typical dynamic strength test, we call that a 1 repetition maximum or a 1 RM. That's the name. Okay? It's the heaviest or largest amount of weight that can be lifted one time with good form. Okay? And the with good form is really, really important. Okay? So it's the most weight I can bench press once, the most weight I can shoulder press up once. Right? This is the typical gold standard. Okay? However, this may not be appropriate for all muscle groups or for all types of lifts that we can perform, especially in populations that are a little bit more at risk. Okay? Because of the range of motion, because of the nature of it being super heavy, sometimes we can be more prone to injuring ourselves if I'm predisposed to that. Just a thing to keep in mind. A derivation of dynamic strength testing is what we call a multiple RM, where you would figure out the most weight you could lift 3 times, or 4 times, or 8 times, or something like that. Okay? So it's often referred to as a multiple RM, or you may say, well, my 5 RM is. So that's the most weight I can lift 5 times. So in doing this, again, it may not be appropriate for all lifts and all muscle groups and all people, but typically when you find a multiple RM, what you do then is take your value, and I have a chart that I'm happy to share with you guys, but you look at it on this chart that's been laid out. If I can lift 100 pounds 5 times, then my 1 rep max is probably about 130 pounds or 140 pounds or whatever it's going to be. Okay? And so you can do a multiple RM and then use that to estimate your 1 RM. And then we typically will then use our 1 rep max value and prescribe how much weight you need to lift based upon your 1 rep. It be at 70% or 80% or 50% or something.
Why would you not just do the 1 RM?
A question I often ask myself, right? Why would you not just do the 1 RM? And I have no good answer for this, right? Now, sometimes if you're doing a lift that is complicated, especially power lifts, like a power clean, right? Or a clean and press or something like these Olympic lifts, if your form is not very good, it can be even more difficult to do the especially heavy lifts. And so you may have someone on those lifts, as they're learning, do some kind of lower amount of weight that's easier based upon their form for them to handle. But in general, I tend to be with you. Just test their 1 RM. Grandma and grandpa can have their 1 RM tested. It's fine. Okay? It's perfectly fine. Don't fiddle fart around with these kinds of things. Just find their max weight. Let's go. Okay? But again, they don't ask me very often kind of what I think about these things. Okay? All right. So here are the procedures for doing this. I just provide this. We're not going to do it in lab. I'm just providing it for you guys so that you can see. If you ever really care, you can compare it to some stuff if you want. Okay, same kind of a thing. Okay, we'll pause here. Let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, so it's 12:01. Let's start back again at 12:06. Okay, so if dynamic testing is in many ways the gold standard, this is the way that we most of the time will do things. For feasibility reasons, cost reasons, there are some other things, okay? We have access to them, like in my lab as a researcher. Some PT clinics have access to them. There are some places where you may see this, okay? So another way to do testing is what we would call isokinetic testing. And it requires a specialized device called an isokinetic dynamometer. And so if you guys want to all turn around and look back in the back, the machine with the blue pads there called a KinCom, that is an isokinetic dynamometer. All right? What this is it's basically a giant robot. And you can adjust the seat and the levers And so you can basically test any muscle, any range of motion, in that you want, okay? And the advantage of using the dynamometer is that it will tell you if you, like this woman is sitting, she's doing a knee extension. So she's sitting and she's gonna kick, okay? It will tell us the precise amount of force that she generates at every point in her range of motion. So it will tell us how much force she's generating here, at her strongest, out in the middle, and then all the way up near full extension. We can also program said robot to let that lever arm move at whatever speed we want it to move, okay? So we can say we want it to be very, very slow. It's going to move at 10 degrees of range of motion per second. So it's going to take her like 10 seconds to do a contraction. We can have it go very slow. We can have it go very, very fast, okay? So it affords us the ability to test all points in a range of motion, not just the weakest, different speeds, very tightly controlled, and because it constrains us, it's going to make our form very, very kind of good and tight. So you're not going to be limited by synergist muscles and some other kinds of things, okay? The problem with isokinetic testing. New, that machine you see back there costs somewhere between, depending upon all the bells and whistles, $60,000 and $80,000. Okay? The one that we got back there was 20. It was used. That machine is probably older than every one of you in class. Okay? It's been refurbished. There's a new computer on it. The one that I have in my lab, the computer runs on, you guys know what DOS is? Anybody ever have an old Windows computer? I learned how to program in high school in something called BASIC, and you would turn your Windows-based computer on, and you would go to a DOS command prompt, and you would have to like type in like, you know, language, like computer language things. It runs on DOS, which is like ancient, okay? So just things to keep in mind. You can buy brand new ones, okay? But they're really expensive. And do we learn a whole lot more by doing this in comparison to doing one rep max testing? For most people, maybe not, okay? They were really sold as rehabilitation machines because you can program the robot to basically, like it will manually like move the leg if you want it to. It will resist against a certain amount, like if you want it to before it will move. So like it will push against you with a certain amount of force the whole time and you got to kick against it. And so in doing all of that, you can, you know, you can constrain the range of motion and you can do these very controlled, very low force contractions to kind of help with rehabilitation. If people have had knee injuries or something like that, but they have somewhat fallen out of fashion because they're super expensive, okay? But some PT clinics have them, some athletic training facilities have them. You just may come across them. Okay. If you take exercise testing and prescription class, no, sorry, if you take exercise physiology lab class with Dr. Pereira, you guys will use that as part of your class, okay? That one is available if you want to use it as part of your capstone project. That is available. This is just our one for like our teaching lab. It's available for your use if you would like it. Okay? Just kind of things to keep in mind. Okay, we talked about this, we talked about this. Okay. So the idea then of isometric strength testing. Let me come back here and get the grip strength thing out of the cabinet. The most common way we do isometric strength testing is by testing grip strength. Okay? Here we have a grip strength dynamometer. Okay? I hold on to it, put my arm out wherever I want to go, and I just squeeze as hard as I can. Yay, grip strength. I did 46 kilograms of grip strength. Okay. And now my hand hurts. Let's test my left hand. I did 45. So both of my hands are sufficiently weak. I think for my age, the normative value is like 65 kilograms or something for a 42-year-old man. But there we have it, okay? So this is one way we do isometric testing. It's simple. This thing costs a couple $100. It's a nice one, okay? You can buy some for much less, okay? It saves time. You don't really have to familiarize for this. You just grab it, you squeeze, off we go, okay? The problem, though, is that it's measuring one very specific joint angle, okay? And so that's going to be a bit of a problem. Isometric testing does not correlate well with sports performance because there's no movement, okay? There's no movement. In a lot of instances, isometric testing is going to better correlate with the amount of muscle you have at whatever joint we're testing, okay? Because it doesn't involve as much with the nervous system because you're not really moving and do things. And in older adults, when you do isometric testing, more people are going to do what's called the Valsalva maneuver, where you hold your breath, right? You contract your diaphragm. You're going to stabilize all of your internal organs, and you're going to squeeze. When you do all of that, it makes your blood pressure skyrocket, okay? So if you're a hypertensive person, that can be bad. And so that's going to be a disadvantage, okay? That's going to be a disadvantage. They make things like this to test strength at pretty much any joint you can think of, okay? Now, the main way that we use the isokinetic device in my lab is we set the isokinetic device so that it won't let you move it, and we do isometric testing with the isokinetic device. So, but again, that's kind of a waste if you're going to be a rehab clinic or someplace for monitoring. It's good for research. That's kind of the deal. Doing muscular endurance, okay? The test that I'm going to show you guys here and for lab are what we call field tests, okay? The push-up test, the curl-up, or the sit-up test, okay? You guys probably all did those as part of the presidential physical fitness testing when you were in junior high or high school or elementary school or something, right? So your mom and dad could get a sticker to put on their, like a bumper sticker they could put on their car, right? And then somebody else can be like, my poodle could beat up your honor student or whatever those things are in the midst of that. But I can do a muscular endurance test with free weights. I just pick a weight and you just lift it as many times as you can. If you get over about 15 repetitions, that's considered a test of muscular endurance, okay? So rather than finding like a 10 RM or a 12 RM, if you're doing like a 20 RM, that's a test of muscular endurance. But the field test, you do push-ups, you do abdominal curls, which are basically crunches, okay? And so you just do as many standard push-ups or modified push-ups, and we have some normative values to kind of lay things out with all of that, okay? Generally, you just do as many as you can consecutively. The idea behind these tests, though, is that we can't really assess muscular endurance if you can't do at least 15 repetitions, okay? So that's partially why we do the modified push-up position for women, is that there will be some women, probably not college-age women, but there will be some that it would be difficult for them to do more than 15 repetitions. Okay? And so that's why we do the modified kind of version of that. We have plenty of guys that do the standard ones that can't do 15. We have some women that can't do 15 with the modified. All that it tells us is you just don't do push-ups very often. That's really all that it's going to tell us at this point. Okay. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Okay, we got time. Okay. So that's testing. That's assessment. Okay. Now we're going to get into the really important part of things. So you've done your testing. We know how strong you are. Now you're going to go to the weight room and you're going to actually lift weights. You're going to go and train yourself. Okay. And so we need to know, we've done our testing, we know how strong you are now. Now let's figure out what should we do if we're going to prescribe resistance training. Okay? So there are a lot of different kind of things that we have to consider when we're going to prescribe exercise to people. What exercise are we going to do? Okay? That's going to be based upon what are your goals, right? What are you comfortable with? What do you want? Where do you want to get stronger? What muscles do you want to make bigger? What task are you trying to get better at? Et cetera, et cetera. So you have to pick an exercise. Most of the time you're going to do more than one exercise, so we need to pick the order in which you do those exercises. The really important thing then is we need to pick the amount of weight that you're going to use. And that typically is going to be prescribed as a percentage of your maximal strength. With resistance training, I'll show you guys in the next couple of slides, we have something called the fit principle. And so the weight that is lifted is our surrogate for the intensity portion of the fit principle. So that's going to be what's going to come in here. So we're going to talk a lot about this. Okay? Then you have to pick the number of sets and the number of repetitions. So I have a certain weight. How many times am I going to lift it? And then if I'm going to do more than one set, I'm going to lift it 8 times, and I'm going to rest, and I'm going to do it 8 times again, and I'm going to rest and do it 8 times again. So that's 3 sets of 8 reps. We're going to pick out what these are going to be. These two things, especially the reps, are going to be inextricably linked with the amount of weight that you're using. And then you can pick rest periods as well. There's a school of thought that the rest periods really, really matter a whole bunch. I'm of the school of thought that it doesn't. There's not a lot of scientific support, depending upon what you want to do, that altering the rest periods does a huge amount. Okay? And then there are 2 really, really, really important kind of training principles that we'll talk about this morning. Okay? The big thing to remember with all of this is this idea called progressive overload and specificity for training. Progressive overload is probably the single most important training principle for any kind of exercise that we're going to do. And I'll make this very simple. Progressive overload is the idea that if it's easy, do more. Okay? If it's easy, do more. If it's not difficult, if you're not overloading your muscles, your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, your metabolic system, whatever it is, okay? If you're not asking it to do more than it is accustomed to do, it will never change. It will never adapt. It will never respond. Okay? And so progression in with the overload is do something that's hard today that's going to be beyond what you normally do. Do that today. Do the same thing next week and the week after. At some point, as you adapt, it becomes, what you've been doing becomes easy or easier. Then you must progress. So that as it becomes easier, now do more again. Okay? Do more weight, do more reps, do another exercise, do more sets, whatever it's going to be. But that's the thing that people don't do. Okay? You'll see it with all kinds of exercise. We don't overload enough. You don't lift enough weight, or you don't lift the weight that you're doing enough times. Okay? And people don't do this because it sucks, right? This is the part that's hard. We'll get to aerobic exercise. You won't run far enough, or you won't run fast enough. You want to do what is easy, what feels comfortable. And that doesn't lead to adaptations, okay? It's partially why I hate exercising. I hate it. If you do it right, it's not fun. It's not meant to be fun. If it's fun, it's not hard enough, okay? Maybe it's fun when you're done, right? It's fun when you're done. You feel like you've accomplished something. But if it's easy and it's fun while you're doing it, then work harder. Maybe that's my dad's a football coach, and I'm just kind of, that's the mindset. But I do not enjoy exercising because I'm going to go, the rare times that I go, and I'm going to do enough that it's hard, okay? It's difficult because I'm not in there to not get adaptations. I want more muscle so I can eat more, okay? I want to burn some calories so I can eat more. That's what really motivates me, right? Doritos, okay? So that's kind of the idea of progressive overload. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. Specificity of training is also really simple. Specificity of training tells us that you're going to get better at doing whatever it is that you're doing. Okay? It's Monday. The bros are bench pressing. Okay? They're getting better at bench pressing. I want you to think in the entirety of your life, any sports you've ever played, anything you've ever done where you felt like it was really important to be able to do this. Okay? This. That's what a bench press is. I'm pushing something away from you. Okay? When you bench press, that's what you get better at doing is bench press. I'm not sure what that transfers to in everyday life. I can tell you when you squat and your quads and your glutes get stronger and you get better at doing this, that's helpful for jumping. Hey, guess what you're doing when you're walking? Quads, glutes, same thing. Running, quads, glutes, yes, good. Okay? So the idea behind specificity of training is that you're going to get better at doing whatever it is that you're doing. The corollary to that is, and I wish I'd taken video of this, okay? So my wife has, despite my better wishes, she has some 2.5-pound dumbbells. They sit in our bedroom. She sometimes does things with them. I usually give her dirty looks when she does. Our daughter, who is 2, picked up those weights last week because we were bored from being inside for however long. Our daughter is carrying around and like hopping and jumping, carrying a 2.5-pound weight in each hand. Y'all see where I'm going with this? My daughter's 2, okay? My wife wants to lift those weights. My 2-year-old daughter can carry them around like it's nothing. So we can go over to the Hoff today. I don't know why they're always pink, but they're always pink, right, ladies? The 5-pound dumbbells. Then the 8s are blue, right? And then the 10s are like maroon or whatever it is. It's like a starter set, okay? We will see people with their 5-pound pink dumbbells, okay? Specificity of training tells us what are people getting better at doing? Lifting the 5-pound dumbbells. I'm doing curls with 5-pound dumbbells. What do you get better at doing? Lifting 5-pound dumbbells. Okay? I did that 10 times. You probably could have done it 100 if you wanted to. So we've got to understand that I need to overload, but also sometimes if I want to drive training adaptations, I need to pick an exercise and pick a set and rep and especially weight that I'm lifting in order to be very specific to get stronger. Lifting light weights makes you better at lifting light weights. If you want to be strong, you have to lift a heavy weight. Okay? If you want to get as strong as you can, just go in and try to test your 1RM every day. Lift as heavy a weight as you can lift every day. That's the best way to get like as strong as possible. It's not the best way to build muscle or get better at playing sports or kind of have any kind of transfer, but that's probably the best way to get, to do that. Okay? People mess this up. It's super easy. And people make it really complicated. Okay? All right. Here it is. Here's the take home. Here's the whole deal right here. And I'll try to be less sort of condescending about it. So here are the recommendations for resistance training from the American College of Sports Medicine. Okay? You should perform each exercise that you're doing, right? And they're going to recommend like 8 to 12 exercises, kind of some upper body, some lower body, to the point of volitional fatigue while maintaining good form. And I'll tell you what this means in a second. You want to do, okay, a weight that is going to be between 60 and 80% of your 1 rep max and do somewhere between maybe 8 to 12 repetitions, okay? Maybe mix in some variety. And going to volitional fatigue means I have 80% of 1RM, I'm going to do it 8 times, and all I can do is 8. I did 8, I tried for 9, I could not do 9. That's volitional fatigue, okay? Every set, you should go to volitional fatigue. That is the key thing to driving increases in strength and maximizing increases in muscle size, is going to volitional fatigue. If you go to volitional fatigue, you are ensuring overload. Okay? You are ensuring overload. If you don't get to volitional fatigue, I can't promise that you've actually overloaded enough. Now, in theory, my dad asked me this the other day. You could take your pink 5-pound dumbbell and do curls until you can't do curls anymore. You could reach volitional fatigue with that 5-pound weight. And there is evidence that if you do that and you go all the way to volitional fatigue, no matter how light the weight is, that drives adaptations just the same way that lifting a very heavy weight where you can get to volitional fatigue in like 2 or 3 reps. The problem is that most people don't want to do 100 reps or 80 reps or even more than like 10 reps with things, okay? That's math. And then you want to rest enough in between sets so that you can continue with good form and get close to the same number of sets, okay? Do 2 or 3 days per week for each muscle group. Do a couple of exercises for each muscle group. Do a couple of sets of 8 to 12 reps where you can't do any more than that. And you're good. That's it. Okay? That's as good a resistance training as 99% of the population ever needs. Okay? That's it. It needs to not be more complicated. Anybody who wants to make it more complicated than that is trying to sell you something. Go lift something reasonably heavy until you can't lift it anymore. And that becomes a little bit easy and you can do a couple of extra reps, add some weight. Go a couple of times a week. You're good. That's it. That's as simple as it needs to be. We make it super complicated, right? This exercise, before that exercise, before this one, with this weird posture where you're balancing on a Bosu ball, and all of this, all crap, okay? Go in, get in the squat rack, do some squats, do some deadlift, do some curls if you want, okay? Really though, quads, glutes, shoulders, back. That's it. You're good. Do the big muscles, the ones we use in everyday life, right? Okay. So ACSM recommends doing what they're going to call core muscle groups, and core does not mean abdominals. Core means multi-joint exercises that involve large muscle groups: chest, shoulder, back, hip, thigh. Squat, bench press, shoulder press, power clean, those kinds of things. And then do assistance exercises, right? Single joint kind of things, stabilizer muscle things second. These first, these second. The idea being, if you do the assistance ones first, you will fatigue the muscles, you'll fatigue your stabilizer muscles, you'll fatigue your synergist muscles, and therefore that will limit your core exercises, and so you cannot overload those muscles properly. These are the big muscles that we really use the most, so we want to make sure we're going to hit those. And then if you want, alternate upper and lower body. You guys will see lots of different plans. We have a class on all of this. There's lots of sophisticated ways to do this, right? It's Monday. All the bros are doing chest exercises today. And they'll come in tomorrow and they'll do like back, okay? Or they'll do back and biceps. Today's push, tomorrow's pull. Maybe Wednesday will be leg day. It will probably be second chest day, okay? You can split things. I'm going to do only upper body today. Tomorrow I'm going to do lower body. Or you can do a bit of everything. I'm going to do an upper body exercise, then I'm going to do a lower body. I'm going to do an upper body. It just lets us rest in between. Okay? There's a little bit of evidence that some of those things are slightly better than others, but the vast majority of it is just go in and get a couple of days with the same muscle group every week, and you're going to be fine. Okay? So when looking at a thing, and I'll post this now that I think about it for your article critique. I have a thing that I use in a previous class. But we use something called the FIT principle. And FIT stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. Okay? If you use this, you can analyze any workout or make up any workout that you want. Frequency is just how often, how many days per week do we need to exercise. Intensity is what's the amount of resistance. Okay? Most things that you find will not get into what the intensity is. It won't say it's 60% of 1 rep max or 80% of your isometric maximal strength or something. Time is typically going to be the number of repetitions in sets, okay? And then type is just What are we doing? Is it squats? Is it bench press? Okay, what's happening? So we can use these things here to analyze things. All right. Ideally, frequency is 2 to 3 days per week. Intensity is somewhere north of 60% of 1 rep max. Time is going to be a couple of sets per maybe 8 to 12 reps. It just kind of depends. And then the type is going to, most of the time, be free weights or machines, and you're going to pick out what your muscle groups are. I assume most of you guys have probably seen the FIT principle before somewhere. Maybe, sort of, yes. Okay, we talked about those things. I want to finish off today by talking about the PROS, or the PROS principles. And this is the idea of progression, regularity, overload, and specificity. Now remember, we've hit on 3 of these a little bit already, okay? But when we get into these things, this is not, in some ways, the exact kind of mechanical how of what we're doing. These are overarching principles that if we know what our goals are, we know why we're doing certain lifts, then this is going to help us achieve those kinds of things. So with progression, the idea with progression is that the demands on the body must continually increase in order for adaptations to occur. Okay? So if you do something and you're used to doing it, it's hard for your body to adapt to it. You need to make it difficult, or you need to make it different. And so it doesn't always mean lifting a higher weight. It may be doing one more exercise. Okay, maybe doing another set. There's lots of ways to kind of get this. In people that are untrained, okay, progression is very fast. I take an untrained person and I train them. I give them something they've never done before. They're going to get a lot stronger really, really fast. So we're going to have to progress very fast. Okay. In people that have been doing the same thing over and over again for a long period of time, progression may be very, very slow. So we just kind of have to keep all of that. Regularity or repetition stands for, are you consistent? Okay? If you want to evoke adaptations, you need to be consistent. Go 2 days a week, every week for 4 months. Okay? You need to be consistent. If I'm going to go like once a week, maybe every 3rd week or something, that's not regularity. Okay? If you miss every other workout session, it's not the fault of your program that you're not getting stronger. That's on you. Okay? So we need to look at and see, are people regularly exercising? That's one of the other keys. You need to do things over and over and over again in order, especially to make muscles get bigger. You need that continuous kind of overload to drive the protein synthesis. So overload, we talked about already. You got to stress yourself beyond what a normal amount of stress is. Okay? And we typically can overload in a given workout by increasing the number of repetitions that I do with a certain weight, increasing the number of sets that I'm doing with a certain weight and a certain number of reps, adding another training session. If I've been doing 2 sessions per week, do a third. Okay? I can sometimes also overload by decreasing the rest interval between sets and between exercises. This is something that some people think is really, really important. Okay? That if you're going to do these very short rest periods, some of the evidence that we originally based that on has been, for the most part, debunked. But I would tell you guys that, give yourself a couple of minutes in between sets and exercises. If you go really, really short things like 45 seconds or 30 seconds or something, what's going to happen is your number of reps is going to go down because of fatigue, and that's sometimes going to be a problem. And then specificity we've already talked about, right? You adapt and get better to whatever stress you're placing on the body. Whatever you're doing, that's what you're going to get better. Okay? So we can increase our fitness, right? It's going to be very specific to the muscle groups you're using, the kind of muscle action, the velocity, the range of motion, the weight lifted, total volume, all of these things are going to come. We talked about safety, blah, blah, that's not that big of a deal. Just on the study guide, just put a giant X through the idea of periodization. Okay? So there's the critique. Questions? I know that was a lot pretty quickly. Who has questions for me? Anybody want to go change how we're working out today? Nobody? You guys are all working out perfectly good. They're all getting good progression and good overload when you go. Regularity is the real problem for me. I have a real problem with regularity. In this. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is